I've always said that the concrete pillars in the underground parking of the Jefferson County Justice Center have a way of swallowing sound. But that morning, the silence was different. It was heavy. Kind of heavy that makes the hair on your arms stand up before you even know why. I'm Alina Vance, and for 15 years I've walked those halls in a black robe, trying to maintain some semblance of order in a world that's constantly fraying at the edges. But on that Tuesday, at exactly 7:08 a.m., I wasn't a judge. Was just a woman in a beige trench coat trying to find a spot because of massive construction. Crane was blocking the entrance to the private judicial lot. I ended up on level 4 of the public garage, space 412, tucked away near a dim fluorescent light that flickered with a rhythmic, annoying buzz. And as I stepped out of my sedan, I noticed a white, heavy-duty dually truck idling 3 spaces down, its headlights cutting through the gloom like predator eyes. I didn't think much of it until the doors creaked open and a man stepped out. His mid-50s, wearing an expensive-looking technical vest over a polo shirt that was a size too small for his ego, followed by a woman clutching a designer tote as if it contained the secret to eternal youth. The man, who I'd later come to know as Sterling Thorne, didn't say good morning or are you lost. He just planted his feet, crossed his beefy arms, and said, "You're in the wrong place, sweetheart. This level is for people who actually have business here. So why don't you hop back in that little car and head over to the bus station where you belong?" I stood there for a second, my car keys still in my hand, feeling that familiar, cold prickle of adrenaline. But I kept my voice like glass smooth and transparent as I told him that the sign clearly stated the garage was open to the public. After 6 a.m., and that I was indeed here for court business, his wife Brenda let out this sharp, performative laugh that sounded like dry leaves skittering on pavement. And she whispered just loud enough for me to hear, "Sterling, she's probably casing the vehicles. Look at that oversized bag. Call Rick right now before she tries something." Sterling didn't need an invitation. He moved into my personal space, close enough that I could smell the expensive roast coffee and the sheer arrogance on his breath.
Aye.
And he told me that he owned the company currently renovating the South Wing, that he knew every important person in this building, and that he had never seen a face like mine in any office that mattered. When I tried to walk past him toward the elevator, he didn't just block me. He reached out and gripped my shoulder, spinning me back toward the concrete pillar with enough force that my shoulder blade barked against the stone. And for a heartbeat, the world went blurry. "I'm not asking you to leave anymore," he growled, his face turning a dark, bruised purple. "I'm telling you that if you aren't out of this garage in 30 seconds, I'm going to drag you out by those braids and let the sheriff sort out the trespass." I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I just looked him dead in the eye while my heart hammered a frantic rhythm against my ribs. I pulled out my phone to dial 911, but Brenda beat me to it, her voice suddenly switching to this high-pitched, trembling damsel in distress act as she told the dispatcher there was a hostile, suspicious individual threatening them on level 4. Within minutes, the elevator chimed, and a security supervisor named Mila Mann I'd seen in the cafeteria for years stepped out, but he didn't look at my bruised shoulder or my scattered files. He looked at Sterling Thorne and smiled. "Everything okay here, Mr. Thorne?" Miller asked, and Sterling just pointed a meaty finger at me, spinning a tale about how I'd lunged at his wife after they kindly asked me to move my car. And Miller just nodded, turned to me, and told me to put my hands against the car because he was detaining a suspect. I tried to tell him, "Miller, look at me. It's Alina." But I was wearing sunglasses, my hair was up, and the shadows were deep. And he just barked at me to shut up before he added a resisting charge to my tab, escorted the Thorns to the elevator like they were royalty, promising to handle the trash, and left me standing there with a bruised shoulder and a burning sense of betrayal that went deeper than the skin. 2 hours later, the lights in courtroom 8B hummed with their usual sterile energy, and the gallery was packed with lawyers, clerks, and a few spectators, including 2 people sitting in the front row looking very smug, very polished, and very ready to file a minor permit grievance. Sterling and Brenda Thorne were whispering to their high-priced attorney. He's probably joking about the crazy woman in the garage, until the bailiff stood up and shouted, "All rise," and the side door opened. I walked in, not in my trench coat, but in the heavy black silk robes of the Superior Court, and as I climbed the steps to the bench and took my seat, the silence in the room became absolute, the kind of silence that feels like the air has been sucked out of a vacuum. I didn't look at the docket. I didn't look at the clerk. I looked straight at the front row. The blood drained out of Sterling Thorne's face so fast. I thought he might actually faint right there on the mahogany bench. His wife's mouth opened, then closed, then opened again like a fish gasping for water. And I leaned into the microphone, my voice echoing through the speakers with a clarity that made the bailiff jump. "Good morning, everyone," I said, my eyes locked on Sterling. "We have a busy morning. But before we get to the motions, I'd like to remind everyone in this courtroom that justice isn't something you buy with a construction contract, and it certainly isn't something you can shove into a concrete pillar when you think no one is watching." The attorney for the Thornes, a man named Henderson, who usually had an answer for everything, looked like he wanted to crawl under the carpet, especially when I called Security Supervisor Miller into the room and asked him on the record in front of a court reporter to explain the detainment protocol he'd used earlier that morning. Watching Miller's face go from confusion to pure, unadulterated terror as he realized he'd handcuffed the woman who signed his performance reviews was a specific kind of theater I'll never forget. But the real show started when I recused myself from their permit case and informed them that a criminal investigator from the district attorney's office was waiting in the hallway to discuss a little thing called. But as the days turned into weeks, the rabbit hole went much deeper than a parking lot ego trip. Because when I started digging into why Miller felt so comfortable siding with a contractor over a citizen, I found a series of lost complaints. In the basement archives, specifically in a dusty annex called Room 302, it turned out that Sterling Thorne hadn't just been renovating the South Wing. He'd been renovating the pockets of several high-ranking county officials for years, ensuring that any complaints against his crew or himself simply evaporated into thin air. And my random encounter in the garage was actually the first time he'd bullied someone who had the power to bully back. We found ledgers, we found text chains, and we found a culture of pay-to-play that had turned our Justice Center into a private club for the wealthy and the well-connected. Behind the very walls they were being paid to build. Sterling ended up facing felony racketeering charges on top of the assault. Miller was fired and stripped of his security license. And the entire South Wing project was halted for a federal audit that ended up sending to county commissioners. Too early retirement in a minimum security facility. I still park in the public garage sometimes. Just to remind myself what it feels like to be on the other side of that glass bench. And every time I pass level 4, I look at space 412 and think about how easily that story could have ended differently if I hadn't been wearing those robes later that day. It makes you wonder, doesn't it? How many people are sitting in those archives in room 302? People who didn't have a robe to protect them. People whose stories were swallowed by the concrete pillars and the flicking lights. We like to think the system is a machine that runs on truth, but sometimes it's just a mirror that reflects whoever is standing in the strongest light. And if that light is bought and paid for, then the rest of us are just stumbling around in the dark. So I want to know, have you ever had a moment where the person you thought was in charge turned out to be the one breaking all the rules? Or have you ever felt the system working against you just because you didn't belong in the room? Drop a comment below, and let's talk about it, because as I learned that morning, the only way to stop the shadows from growing is to keep talking about what's hiding in the basement.